Hey guys, welcome back to Olde Carr Guy. In a previous video, we got this old 68 Monaco 500 with a 440 running. Well, today, we're working on brakes so we can get it driving. Stay tuned. So one of the things that we've got to do today here is we've got to replace the brake booster and the master cylinder. Now, I don't suspect there's anything wrong with the brake booster itself. The master cylinder is not doing what it's supposed to be doing. Now, we're going to have to get the car up on the hoist here when that gets freed up so we can access the bleeders on all four wheels. Now, this is a four-wheel drum car, so that means we've got wheel cylinders all the way around. We don't know if they're leaking. We don't know if they're seized. We're going to have to get in there. But Tom is not taking anything to chance. He wants to replace everything up here anyway. Once we get the wheels off, then we can determine whether or not we need to be replacing wheel seals, springs, anything like that. So what we'll do first is we'll get this new master cylinder bench bled, and we've got it all set up here. Then we can get the master cylinder off the firewall with the brake booster and get those two components swapped out. Then we'll be able to determine whether or not we're actually getting any pressure at all to the brake pedal. Will there be some air in the line? More than likely, but at the very least, we'd like to be able to get this thing out of this bay and over into this one. As I go grab some brake fluid, why don't you guys take time to hit the thumbs up if you like this video, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, because when you do that, it tells YouTube that I'm doing a pretty good job. At least I hope I am. And you know, we're trying to grow the channel. Also, don't forget, I'm on Instagram. I'm gonna put that right up here. You can follow behind the scenes pictures over there. Let's get to work. So if you don't know what bench bleeding is supposed to do, well, neither do I. I just saw it on a YouTube video once from Mortsky Repair, and he plays a pretty good job at somebody who knows what he's doing. But all seriousness, what we're trying to do is get any air that might be inside that cylinder out. And what we're doing is there's a piston inside here. We're just taking a screwdriver to push the piston. And as we do that, it pumps air out, and then when you let go, it's supposed to suck the fluid back in through the system. So even though we've only pumped it a few times, the fluid level is down about half where we started. So I'm going to top that up again so that our lines don't come out of the fluid and introduce air back into the system. And then we just keep doing this until there's no more air bubbles coming out, and then it's ready to put on the car. I don't know if you saw that in that front chamber or not. When I let go, it sucks in the fluid, but if you pump and fluid gives a little jump instead of air, then you know that side's done. This one, this back one here, is still giving a little tiny bit of air, but we should be pretty close. And I think that's good. So now what we can do is we can take these little plastic lines off with our paper clips, and then we'll put the cover on it, and we'll be good to go until we need to bleed the wheel cylinders on the car itself. So those guys are under there, under the dash, trying to get the brake booster off. There's that big bolt that goes in that connects to your brake pedal. And then there's 4 bolts in the firewall that's got to come off so that that thing kind of just drops out. Never any fun working upside down on the firewall, especially when the seats are in the car. But there's the new brake booster, and that's the bolt they're working on right now that connects to the brake pedal. And one of the things that Tommy tells me is that the rear brake lines are non-existent simply because they were rusted. They cut them off. So we're going to have to run some rear brake lines to the back. Front ones look like they're still there because when we took the master cylinder off, they stayed put. So the front brakes lines are probably still there. So that might just be a matter of getting them bled. And we'll take the vice grips to the rear brake lines, what's left of them, and hopefully be able to at least move the car with front brakes anyway. All right, Tom, we'll get this brake booster shoved in there. And see, make sure the holes line up. That'd be awesome, right? So part of the trouble we're having is we've got to get to the 4 bolts that hold that onto the firewall, and there's like no room to work. The brake pedal's in the way, the steering column's in the way. You can see we got one here, one over here, and then one way up there. The other one's kind of buried and hidden. Hard to get your fingers in there. Anyways, we're going to tackle her, see what we can do. Now, we got 3 of them in there. The last one to get is a tough one because you can't even see it. So there's the top one there, and everything is in the way. You get that piece of metal bracket for the steering column to the right, and you get that brake, the lever coming out of the booster itself on the left, which only gives you a couple of inches to actually get your fingers up in there. Anyways, back at her. All 4 bolts. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we've got to get that pivot bolt back into the brake pedal. That one might not be so difficult, but I might be wrong too. Now, in theory, if I just sit that in there, move this brake pedal out.
You need to do anything, reach across the seat here and hold something.
So that's in. Now we got to get the nut on it. Where'd that go? All right, so now we got to get a wrench on both sides and tighten her up. Perfect. Spoke too soon. Okay, so we get the brake pedal connected back up to the booster, and we're ready to start hooking up some brake lines to see if maybe we can get the front brakes working on this thing, at least enough to get it around the dooryard here. And Tom has asked me that if any of you guys out there know where we can get some trim pieces, like for the side of the seat here on this 68 Monaco, we're looking for some. This one's actually busted up pretty good.
The same thing here, just dry rotted and very, very brittle. So.
He's got the same thing over there. It's just dry rotted and quite brittle. So hit us up in the comments if you know where we can pick up some of those trim pieces. We've got the brake lines hooked up to the master cylinder, and Tom thought he cut out the brake lines. He didn't. He cut out the fuel lines by the looks of things. We traced the line down here, and there is a line that goes all the way along the frame rail and up into the rear axle, so we might be good. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get the gas jug hooked up, the smaller one, and we're actually going to put the hose in it this time, Tom.
Yes, that's a good thing to remember.
And we'll just bungee it to the inner fender here so that we can start the car and back it out and move it over the hoist. Anyways, let's get that done and get the car moved over. Okay, Tom, do we have the gas hooked up?
It's hooked up.
Are you sure?
Gas in the can.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. So gas is hooked up. We just tried the emergency brake, and surprisingly it works and releases. So Tom's going to start it up and we'll get it moved over. So let's get this thing going here first. She'll go. So no brakes and no power steering. On an icy surface, Tom, are you sure you're up for the challenge? Well, at least if he drives into the building, it's his car.
Your door, but not gonna hurt my car. I got a trailer hitch on the back of it.
after getting the car over here and making sure that we had brake lines, which we did, we wanted to make sure that we had the bleeders would break free. And I guess 3 out of the 4 did. And we've got one over here that we're going to likely have to replace the wheel cylinder. So we're going to call around, see if we can find one of those, and then we can start bleeding some brakes. Well, that was short-lived, and the reason is we think we've got a bad proportioning valve. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. So we did get the proportioning valve off, and it seems like everything's flowing through it okay. I've sprayed some penetrating fluid in there, and it just kind of flows out like nothing. So I don't think this is the problem. I think the problem is the brake lines themselves maybe have some rust or some blockages in them. So we're going to take the air, we're going to blow through them, hopefully clean them out, and we'll get that proportioning valve put back together and see if we can't bleed out some brakes.
Let's blow some pressure through here and see if it blows these out. See, it's rusty looking there. But see, even if they are plugged, air should still went through the bleeder, in through the line and out. All it is in and out there. Yeah. Unless it's right full of crud. Maybe they are all seized. Oh, that was over. There's fluid come out of that. So. Yeah. So it shouldn't stop fluid from coming out.
So we took the air hose and we were able to blow through this wheel cylinder and have it come out the line, and it was blowing out of this wheel. So we cleared that out. We put the bleeder back in there. We blew through it again to see if we could get fluid to come out through the rear brake line coming up, and nothing. So somewhere along the way, we've got some bad lines or rusty lines or something that the air pressure is not going through. So in an attempt to figure out where the blockage was, we got this rear brake hose off, and of course it broke up here. But as soon as this line started breaking a little bit, fluid started coming out. So we went up front, put the hose on it, and of course it blew all kinds of crap all over the floor. So we've got to replace the lines anyway. We're just trying to get all the brakes working before we went through all that effort. But the hose here seems to be the trouble. You probably can't see it, but if you look in there, it's got some crud or something blocking it up. But I mean, those are the original hoses. Up front here, we'll probably find a couple of hoses up here as well. Right there. And that's likely where our issue is up front. So we got wheel cylinders, we'll get the brake hoses, and we're gonna have to do a bunch of brake line work. So it's after lunch on Friday afternoon, and Dad decided he was gonna start tackling the brake lines and wheel cylinders and the hoses for the Monaco. But we ran into a small issue. These little flared brake fittings right here, we don't have any. So I'm gonna go up to the part store. We're gonna start with CarQuest because they are just down the road. And if they don't have what we need, we'll hit Napa. And if they don't have enough of them, then we're gonna have to probably hit both. But anyways, we're on a mission to find flared brake fittings. So we got our fittings, and we also got a fresh roll of Nycop, and I like using the Nycop over the steel simply because it's a lot easier to work with. It's easier to bend, also easier to kink, but anyways, just simply easier to work with, so we're gonna go with that. Anyways, back to the shop and we'll get to work on the brakes. Okay, so it's now Saturday morning. Yesterday afternoon got quite busy for me, and well, Dad kind of took over and started working on the Monaco with the brake cylinders and brake lines, and he's got most of it done. As you can tell over my left shoulder, the spindle is empty. The backing plate and the brakes are sitting over here on the toolbox, and we're just getting ready to put that back together. But before we get there, let's take a look at the rear brakes and see how far Dad got yesterday. So we managed to get the new wheel cylinders in on the back and the brake lines run. If we come over to this side over here, you'll see the same thing. He's got the new cylinder that was there because that was the only bleeder we couldn't crack open initially when we first started working on these brakes. The brake lines are in, and we did use the Nycop brake lines because, like I said earlier, they're so much easier to work with, easier to bend up. And all Dad did was he followed the path of the original ones, came in, there's a little clip right here, and then up over the differential, there's another clip here, comes up into this distribution block, and then from the distribution block over to this wheel cylinder on the left-hand side. Now, as I mentioned, we did replace the brake hose going to that rear distribution block, and then he ran a new line up and over and followed the path of the factory brake line that goes along the frame rail here or the rocker panel. And as we get up in here, you'll see that line comes up into here. So we've got to get our distribution block. Hang it. I think I left it up there on the car. So once we get this side put together, we'll move over to the driver's side, and that's where you guys are going to pick up and follow along with me tearing all that apart and putting it back together. We'll get the distribution block back up on the inner fender, up in here on the side of the engine, and we'll start screwing all the brake lines in. Once we get that done, then I'm gonna have to recruit either my wife or Junior to come over and give me a hand bleeding these brakes, because at this point, it's all air. We're gonna have to put brake fluid in, keep topping it up, keep pushing that pedal. I do have a air-powered brake bleeder. Might be able to do it myself. We'll see how that goes. But at the end of the day, we just might have to have that second body here to give me hand bleeding those brakes. Anyways, I'm gonna put this side back together, and I'll pick you guys back up when we're tearing apart the driver's side. Okay, so we're getting ready to tear this side apart. We do have the drum off, and we've got the springs released here so that we can get this backing plate off into our hands. It's gonna be a lot easier to work on to change out that wheel cylinder and get things going here. So in order to do that, we've got to take these 4 bolts out here. The problem with that is your torsion bar suspension has that lower control arm loaded. And if you pop these out, it's gonna, that control arm is gonna come crashing down. So normally what you would do is you would dig out the transmission jack over there, but we're not gonna do that. We've got the pry bar jack stand here. We're just gonna lower the car down a little bit to get that load off that control arm. Then we can get in there, get those bolts out, and nothing will move. Or at least in theory, that's what's supposed to happen, so I don't know. So we're gonna get the backing plate off. We're gonna get it on the workbench so that we can get the wheel cylinder off, get that swapped out, and then we'll reverse the process, put everything back together, and we can get our line, or our hose, and then connect our lines, which, if I haven't told you already how much I hate doing brake lines, I'm some glad that Dad had nothing to do yesterday afternoon and tackled the rear. So Dad, thank you for looking after that. Nevertheless, we've still got these 2 front brakes and everything that plugs into that distribution block to get connected. So let's get some music going, get this thing tore apart. All right, so now that we've got the brake drum or the backing plate out in our hand, we just got a couple of bolts to take out that hold that wheel cylinder in place. We'll put the new one in, and then we can just kind of reverse the process. You notice that that one bolt was kind of holding me up getting this thing out. Well, it was kind of seized in there, and I had to kind of beat away at it with the hammer. And I'll be honest, I was scared that that pole was going to pop out and like break my arm or something. But anyway, let's get these things out and get that switched. Put this down on low so we don't snap anything. And there is a left and a right to these wheel cylinders simply because the way that the brake line comes out one way and the bleeder comes off the other when it comes up through the spindle. So these have an elongated neck on them, and you're going to wrap your wrench right around that when you go take this hose off, if you had to. We're putting new ones on the new system anyway. So you got to make sure you got the right one. We've already put the other one on, so I've only got one left. It's got to be this one. So we will compare the two. They look good, so let's get it in there. Okay, we got the wheel cylinder in place, and now we're going to get our springs hooked up Just remember that your self-adjuster cable is going to go in first and lay flat against that retainer. But I'm not going to hook it up yet to the self-adjuster because on the passenger side, this little clip, the cable itself was in the way of that bottom bolt. So we'll get that in first and then we can just hook that back up. So for now, we're just going to set that aside and we'll just take our old-fashioned brake tool here that's probably older than I am, come out of my dad's toolbox, and we'll get these things put into place. All right, so this thing here is now ready to go back on the car. So let's reverse the process that we just did by taking it off. Okay, so we've got this side all back together. The wheel bearing is back in there, and we've got our brake hose secured on both sides, front and, left and right. So now comes the really fun part. The really, really fun part, and that's bending up brake line and flaring and the devil's mechanic work. So there's the two front lines. This one here is the driver's side, much shorter, and the passenger side, I had to cut it to get it out. But we're not going to pre-cut them or pre-bend them before we put them up. We're going to start at the block and work our way out because we've got to get one end flared to go into the block before we come out to each wheel. It's going to be a heck of a lot easier to flare it down here on the bench than it is to start flaring and cutting and all that crap up there in closed quarters. So we're going to start with the one that's furthest away, which is the passenger side. I told you how much I don't like doing brake lines. Anyway, we'll get some brake lines run. As I'm actually running them through the car, I'll probably time lapse that. So again, you guys can't hear me. You'll just have some really cool music to listen to. One of the reasons why I really hate doing brake lines, let me show you. So one of these fittings I had to reuse, the original off the car, because it's a bigger nut. And I couldn't get it to start, well, I guess I could get it to start, but it would only go about half a thread. And as you can see right there, it's been rubbed up against something metal at some point in time, probably my doing, and has galled the threads up a little bit, which that end is going to be threading into the brass distribution block, and all you're going to do is tear up the threads on that if you try and force it in there. So I don't have another one of these threads. I do. I lied. I got one for the other side. So if I use it here, I'm not going to have one for the other side. Nevertheless, I'm down one. So I guess we're stuck. Either have to chase the thread or file the threads down. My kit doesn't have a big enough tool to chase those threads, so it looks like we're down to a file, and we'll see what we can do. Anyways, it's shit like this that holds up progress on an already shitty job. So have you guys ever done something stupid like this before and left yourself in a little bit of a pickle? Go ahead and leave me a comment down below. And also, how would you fix this? So I'm glad I don't have to deal with these brake lines anymore. I know that my father did a majority of the work, but what little bit I did was a pain in the ass. Anyway, we're getting ready to add brake fluid to the reservoir. All the lines are run to the distribution block. They're all tight, I hope. And as long as the flares that I put on are done correctly, which I think they are, we should be able just to add some fluid, and we'll start using our pneumatic brake bleeder to draw all the fluid to the lines, and then I'll have to recruit somebody to do the fine tuning inside with pressing on the pedal. So we're gonna get that done and see how far we can get bleeding these brakes. So we were using the trusty Mighty Vac to see if we could use the brake bleeder there to siphon the fluid out, but it's not doing anything. So we've got Junior here. He's going to be our designated brake pumper upper. So let's get the car up in the air a little bit and start with that right rear. Took us a lot of fluid to get to that right rear. This one here shouldn't be so bad. Go ahead and pump, push it down. Down. There's some air. All over my phone. No thanks to Junior, now we have brakes. We've got all 4 wheels bled. We started at the right rear, then the left rear, right front, and left front. I've sprayed all the backing plates down with some brake cleaner to get rid of the mess, and I've since hosed down the floor so that we're not slipping and sliding in the brake fluid. So now what we've got to do is get the front wheels and tires back on the car, set it down on the ground, and test our brakes. Make sure that they are working, and we may still have to do some adjustment on those drums because, well, the car's been sitting around for so long, who knows what the brakes were like when they parked it. But at the very least, we're going to test it right here in the shop in a controlled manner. Safety third. Anyway, I'm going to do that, and I'll be right back with you, and we'll test the brakes, make sure everything's working properly. All right, we got her back down on the ground, and we're going to start her up and see if the brakes are going to hold this beast. And yes, we have gas. Starts up just like that, imagine. Yep. It holds, but I do have to go down almost to the floor to get it to engage and put a little bit of effort into it. I think like I said before, the drums just need to be adjusted, so we will get to that at some point here in the near future. But for today, that's all she wrote. I've been out here since 11 o'clock, and it's 20 to 5. Bled. And basically working away, getting those brake lines done, putting things back together, trying to get the brakes bled. Thanks to Junior, and thanks again to Dad for working on those rear brakes. So I think the brakes are adjusted enough that we could take it for a little cruise if we wanted to. Tom's not here today. I don't want to do that to him. He should be the one to be able to take this thing on its maiden voyage. So we'll wait for Tom to get over here one day this week. Hopefully the roads are dry. At the very least, we can just kind of take it up the road and back. I'd hate to get this thing out in the salt if the roads are bad. Anyways, we'll be right back. Well, guys, that's going to do it for this episode. Working on the Monaco, getting these brakes working. The mechanical list is ticking down. Yes, we do still have to adjust the brakes and get that situated so that we can actually drive it on the road. But other than that, things are getting checked off the list. We still got some detailing work to do. That'll be in an upcoming video, as well as getting the carburetor looked after. We're going to tear that apart, rebuild it. We've got a kit. Get that cleaned up, your very own Dale looking just as nice as the rest of the car. If you guys want to support my channel in more ways than just watching my videos, make sure you head over to my merch store. You can get your very own Dale the Truck t-shirt, just like this one, as well as the original OG Olde Carr Guy t-shirt. There's a Focus branded t-shirt in there as well, and a couple of other items that might interest you. Now's the time to tell you to hit that like button. Go ahead and subscribe to this channel because we've got lots more coming, not just on the 68 Monaco, but we've got a few items that we're going to be doing to the 79 Chrysler Cordoba as well as Dale the Truck. The Yugo has got some stuff coming up on it as well, not to mention Blackjack, the lifted Grand Marquis. Guys, thank you for everything. Stay focused on the windshield, not the rearview mirror. I love you. God bless. We'll see you in the next one. All right, so we got the fuel. We've got the brake lines hooked up to the master cylinder. He's got most of it done, as you can tell over my left shoulder here. That spindle and everything is, and then back over to the, oh my goodness, can't even think. Come on, Jason, use your words. Back over to the, and then from the distribution block over to this wheel cylinder on the left-hand side. So what we'll have to do once we get this side put together and then get the passage. I guts the dumbs, I can't think. Anyways, we're gonna get this off. We're gonna get the, so anyways, we're gonna get the, what do they call that thing? Again, not using words today. Backing plate. As we go. We're gonna start at the junction box or the again, I can't remember the name of that distribution block or whatever you want to call it.
Gotta have battery first.
You can get yourself your very own Dale the Truck t-shirt.